I should have walked back inside. I should have let the moment pass like mist evaporating in the sun. But I didn't. Something in the air between us refused to let me retreat. Something quiet, unspoken, that told me there was still more to understand, more to feel. I stayed on the porch, the rain having finally softened to a drizzle, and watched him pause by his car. His coat was damp at the shoulders, hair clinging slightly to his forehead. He looked hesitant, waiting, not for me to act but for permission to just be present. I started, then stopped. Words felt heavy, weighted by all the unacknowledged years, the small disappointments, the lonely evenings, the dishes scrubbed, the rooms tidied, the quiet that had grown between me and Mark. I don't even know what to say. Then don't. Isaac replied softly. Just stand here. That's enough. Just let this be what it is for now. And so we stood there, two adults shaped by decades of choices, past and present, letting the quiet stretch between us. My chest rose and fell in rhythm with the faint patter of rain on leaves. A car passed on the street, its lights reflecting off puddles, but it felt like a separate world. Ours was still, like the air had been held just for this one fragile, delicate space. Finally, I felt my hand twitch, wanting the warmth I had felt yesterday, the connection that had shocked me with its simplicity and its honesty. But I didn't reach for him. Not yet. There was no rush. That was the thing. There never had been a rush. He had made it clear he wouldn't force anything, and somehow, that made me trust him more than I had trusted anyone in years. I think. I whispered, barely audible over the soft drip of water from the porch roof. I think what scares me most is not knowing what comes next. He nodded slowly. The unknown is always frightening. But it's also where truth lives. Where we finally find ourselves. Where we're not pretending. Where we stop performing for everyone else and just exist for a moment. I swallowed. Those words, they hit me in a place I'd forgotten was even there. I remembered nights long ago, lying awake, wishing for someone to see me. Not my role, not my usefulness, but me, Grace. And here he was, standing in the drizzle, offering exactly that, seeing me. For me. We started walking slowly toward the street, our steps falling into the rhythm of the fading rain. I didn't touch him, didn't seek his hand. But somehow every glance, every small shift of his gaze, felt like an invitation. A silent acknowledgement that, yes, this was real, but it was ours to define, ours to move through carefully. I can't. I started, stopping mid-sentence. I can't promise anything. Not yet. I don't even know if I should. You don't have to, he said, looking at me with those calm, steady eyes that had a way of making the world shrink to just this one moment. All I'm asking is that you be honest. With me. With yourself. Whatever comes of that, it's yours. No one else's. That simple honesty, the absence of pressure, felt revolutionary. It made my throat tighten in a strange, bittersweet way. Years of habit, of politeness, of suppressing my own wants, seemed to evaporate in that quiet space between us. I realized I hadn't felt seen like this in decades. Not truly. Not like this. We paused again near the corner of the street. The rain had nearly stopped. The smell of wet earth mingled with the faint scent of his cologne lingering in the space between us. My mind flashed briefly to Mark. His late nights, his distracted glances, the way he never seemed to notice me, except as part of the background of his life. A pang of guilt hit me, sharp and sudden, but it was intertwined with relief. Relief that I was finally recognizing my own needs, my own heart. I hesitated, searching for words that could do justice to the whirlwind of emotions swirling inside me. I don't know if I've allowed myself to feel this in years, to admit that I might need something more than what I've settled for. He gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. You deserve that, he said quietly. You deserve to want, to feel, to be noticed, to be valued. Not for what you do for others, not for how reliable you are, but simply for who you are, Grace. My heart caught again at the sound of my name on his lips. It felt like a weight lifted. And yet, there was tension too, because the recognition of desire, of connection, doesn't erase the complications, the responsibilities, the reality of my life. It only makes them sharper. We stood there in silence for a few more moments. No words. Just presence. Just acknowledgement that something had shifted. Something fundamental had changed, and there was no going back. Finally, I took a deep breath, feeling the cool air mix with the residual warmth of our shared moment. I need time, I said, my voice steady but soft. I need to think about all of this. About me, about us, about everything. That's fair, he said, with the calmness that had drawn me in from the beginning. Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere. Not unless you ask me to. And with that, we slowly began to part. He walked back to his car, opening the door with a quiet, gentle motion, and I turned toward my house. The porch light glimmered softly in the twilight, the rain now just a whisper on the leaves. I paused at the door, feeling the weight of the key in my hand, feeling the pulse of my own heart loud in my ears. For the first time in years, I felt a strange exhilaration alongside fear. Life, it seemed, was no longer entirely predictable, no longer entirely safe. But maybe, just maybe, that was exactly what I needed. I stepped inside, the warmth of my home wrapping around me like a familiar coat. The faint smell of stew lingered from the night before. Everything looked the same, everything sounded the same. And yet, nothing felt the same at all. I realized that even small choices, staying a moment longer, allowing someone to see me, could ripple outward, changing the texture of life in ways I had long thought impossible. Later that evening, as I sat quietly with a cup of tea, I found myself smiling at the thought of him. Not in a reckless, forbidden way, but with gratitude. Grateful that someone had noticed me, truly noticed me. That someone had reminded me that even at 50, life could surprise me. Even at 50, the heart could awaken again, quietly, persistently, without shame or apology. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring. I didn't know how I would navigate the thin line between loyalty, desire, and honesty. But for the first time in years, fully awake. And that was worth everything. The next morning, sunlight crept softly through the curtains, painting faint stripes across the carpet. I sat at the kitchen table, my fingers wrapped around a mug of lukewarm coffee, staring at the steam curling in the air. The house was quiet. Too quiet. Mark had already left for work, his shoes clacking down the hallway, the faint smell of his cologne lingering before it faded entirely. I should have felt relief. I should have felt the normalcy of routine settle over me like a familiar blanket. Instead, I felt suspended. My mind kept wandering back to Isaac. To the way he had said my name, the gentle honesty in his voice, the warmth of his hand brushing mine. I could feel it still, like an echo in my veins, subtle yet impossible to ignore. I set my coffee down and walked to the window, peering out at the street. The rain had stopped completely, leaving small puddles glinting in the sunlight. Across the road, I noticed his car parked by the curb, just sitting there as if waiting. My heart caught in my chest. I hadn't invited him. I hadn't asked for anything. And yet, the universe, or maybe fate, had put him there, patient, steady, unobtrusive. I opened the door and stepped outside. The air smelled clean, faintly of wet asphalt and the lingering perfume of rain. He straightened as soon as he saw me, his expression calm, open, careful. There was a distance, polite, but it carried a weight that made the air between us almost electric. "Good morning," he said softly. No pretense, no bravado. Just him present as though nothing else existed. "Morning," I replied, my voice steady even though my heart was hammering. I didn't move closer. I didn't need to. Just standing there felt charged enough. "I didn't want to disturb you," he said, taking a careful step back from the car, giving me space. "But I wanted to make sure last night didn't leave you unsettled." I smiled faintly, a mixture of warmth and uncertainty. "I'm fine," I said, really just thinking. He nodded slowly, eyes soft, patient. "Thinking is good. Reflection is necessary. But don't think too much that you lose yourself in it." His words settled on me like a gentle hand. They weren't demands or advice. They were observations. He wasn't trying to fix me. He wasn't trying to control me. He simply saw me, and he respected that I needed to come to my own conclusions, in my own time. We stood there, just looking at each other for a long moment. In the distance, a neighbor's dog barked, a child's laughter echoed faintly. But around us, it felt like the world had shrunk to a small stretch of sidewalk. Two people tethered together by something unnamed, fragile, and entirely new. "Grace," he began, his voice lower now, carrying a softness that made my chest ache. "I know this is complicated. And I know, I can't be what you need right now in a full sense. I can't erase the years or the responsibilities or the life you've built. I know," I whispered, barely audible. "I don't expect that. I just..." I stopped. Word, 'cause everything inside me was in motion. The long years of quiet loneliness, the small unmet needs, the faint ache of wanting someone to truly notice me, they all converged in a single pulse of clarity. I just want to be seen, I finally admitted, my voice trembling slightly. He took a careful breath, his hand brushing against his thigh as if restraining the urge to reach for me. "You are seen," he said quietly. "I see you. Not your routines, not your role, not what you do for others. Just you, Grace. And it matters." That simple acknowledgement made tears prick at the corners of my eyes. Not because of guilt or desire, but because of recognition. Someone had seen me fully, without expectation, without judgment, without needing anything in return except honesty. We lingered there, in silence again, letting the moment stretch. Then he said softly, "I want you to feel safe, Grace. Safe to acknowledge what you feel without fear. Safe to think about what you want without guilt. And safe to choose, whatever that might be." I looked down at my hands. The wedding ring glinted faintly in the sunlight, a reminder of the life I had committed to, the husband who loved me in his way, though perhaps not fully present. My heart twisted slightly at the thought, but the pull of what I felt with Isaac was undeniable. It wasn't lust. It wasn't recklessness. It was awareness. Presence. Being seen. "I don't know how to navigate this," I admitted, voice soft, almost a whisper. "I don't know if I should, or if I can." "You don't have to navigate it alone," he said gently. "And you don't have to decide today. Not ever. All I ask is that you remain honest with yourself. With what you feel. With what you want." I nodded, letting the words sink in. I realized that part of me had been craving this honesty for years, silently, secretly. And now, here it was, offered without pressure, without expectation, without conditions. It was terrifying. And it was beautiful. The morning stretched on quietly, with only the distant sounds of a waking neighborhood around us. I felt my chest expand with a mixture of fear and relief. I realized that even acknowledging these emotions made me feel alive again. Not like the predictable, safe life I'd lived for decades, but real, vulnerable, awake. Eventually, he stepped back toward his car. "I should go," he said softly, though there was no urgency in his tone. I'll be here." Not demanding. Not expecting. Just here. I watched him walk to his car, feeling the pull of something I couldn't yet name, but couldn't deny. I wanted to reach out, to ask him to stay, to explain everything. But I didn't. Part of the power of this moment was in its restraint, in its quiet honesty. I stepped inside my house, closing the door gently behind me. The warmth of the familiar surroundings contrasted sharply with the charged energy of the morning. I set down my empty mug, my hands trembling slightly, and leaned against the counter. For the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't allowed myself to feel in a long time: possibility. Not certainty. Not promise. Just the faint, thrilling possibility that life could still surprise me, even at 50. That my heart, long dormant, could still awaken. That I could still choose. I didn't know what would happen next. I didn't know how Mark would fit into this new awareness. I didn't know if Isaac and I would ever cross the line beyond quiet acknowledgement. But I did know one thing. For the first time in a very long time, I didn't feel invisible anymore. And that was everything. The days that followed were quiet in their ordinary way, but inside me, nothing felt ordinary anymore. The kitchen still smelled faintly of coffee and toast, Mark still rushed in and out with a distracted half smile, and the neighborhood still hummed with the mundane rhythm of life. But I had changed. Somehow, standing there on the porch with Isaac, feeling him see me, had shifted something fundamental. It wasn't reckless. It wasn't dramatic. It was subtle, persistent, a thread weaving through the pattern of my daily life. I found myself noticing things differently. The way sunlight struck the table in the morning. The way the curtains fluttered when a breeze came through the open window. Even the quiet ticking of the kitchen clock. It all seemed sharper, more vivid, and always, beneath it, that pull. The memory of his hand, the sound of his voice, the honesty in his eyes. I tried to push it down at first. That's what I'd always done when feelings grew inconvenient. But the more I tried to ignore it, the louder it became. A whisper at first, then a hum, then a persistent H that made ordinary moments feel hollow without acknowledgement. Mark, as always, remained steady in his routines, oblivious in his busy way. He asked about my day, nodded when I mentioned errands, and made small talk about bills and the neighborhood. I answered politely, but my mind kept drifting. Sometimes I caught myself staring out the window, thinking of Isaac standing there quietly, not demanding, just present. My pulse quickened at the memory, the subtle warmth of his presence lingering like a faint perfume in the room. Then one evening, Mark stayed late again, working on a project that had suddenly become urgent. I was alone, chopping vegetables for dinner, when the faint sound of a car door closing outside made me pause. My heart gave a small, startled leap. I knew before I even looked that it would be him. I turned slowly and there he was. Isaac, coat damp from the drizzle, standing there with a careful smile that made the air between us taut. "I didn't want to interrupt," he said softly, "but I thought, maybe you could use some company." I felt a mixture of thrill and caution. "I'm fine," I said automatically, though my voice betrayed the tremor in my chest. "Just cooking dinner." He stepped closer, but with a careful restraint that made the tension almost unbearable. "I don't need to intrude," he said. "I just wanted to be near you. For a moment. That's all." And in that moment, the room seemed smaller, warmer, charged with a quiet intensity that neither of us spoke aloud. I set down the knife, feeling the weight of the moment pressing gently against my chest. I wanted to reach for him, to bridge the gap, but I didn't. Instead, I let the silence stretch, letting him feel what he wanted without forcing it, letting myself feel what I hadn't allowed in years. We moved to the living room, sitting on opposite ends of the sofa, but the space between us felt electric. Every glance, every subtle movement, carried weight. The evening light slanted through the curtains, casting stripes across the floor, across him, across me. For a long time, we said nothing. We didn't need words. The quiet was enough. Finally, I spoke. "Isaac, I don't know how to handle this," I whispered, my hands twisting in my lap. "I don't know what's right, what's fair, or even what I want." He leaned back slightly, his expression soft but serious. "Grace," he said, voice low, careful, "you don't have to know. Not yet. All I ask is that you're honest with yourself. With what you feel. That's the only thing that matters, nothing else." His words struck me, unrelenting in their simplicity, not commanding, not demanding, just truth. And in that truth, I felt the stirrings of courage, something I had long forgotten I possessed. We spent the evening like that, talking in fragments, sharing stories, laughing quietly, letting our words brush against each other without crossing lines. It was intimate, yes, but not physical. Not yet. It was about connection, about seeing and being seen, about allowing ourselves to feel something real in a life that had grown predictable and safe. When he finally left, the air seemed emptier, but my chest was fuller. The pull was still there, steady, persistent, but it was no longer frightening. It was a reminder that life, my life, was still mine to navigate, still capable of stirring in unexpected ways. The next morning, Mark arrived home later than usual. I noticed small details about him I hadn't in years. The way he smiled at nothing in particular, the way he rubbed the bridge of his nose when he was tired, the faint scent of his cologne blending with the smell of morning toast. I realized I was watching him differently too. Not with desire, not with longing, but with clarity, with awareness. I understood that my heart could hold multiple truths at once. Love for my husband, connection to someone else, the recognition of my own desires, all coexisting in careful balance. And then the thought struck me sharply, this wasn't just about Isaac. It was about me, about finally acknowledging that I had needs, that I had wants, that I deserved to be seen, heard, and understood. That realization, raw and undeniable, filled me with a quiet determination I hadn't felt in decades. Later that week, I found myself on the porch again, staring at the street, wondering if he would come by, wondering if I would allow myself to lean into this new awareness. And he did, of course he did. He appeared quietly, with no fanfare, no expectation. He was simply present, and in that presence, I found a strange, thrilling comfort. We spent hours walking through the neighborhood, the world muted around us. Talking, laughing softly, sharing thoughts we hadn't shared with anyone else. With every word, every glance, every gentle acknowledgement, I felt the long, quiet part of my heart waking up. It wasn't reckless. It wasn't forbidden. It was honest, pure, and it mattered more than I could have anticipated. By the time the sun dipped low behind the rooftops, I realized I hadn't once thought about the complications, about judgment, about consequences. I had only thought about truth, about presence, about being alive in a way I hadn't allowed myself to be for years. When he finally left, I didn't feel emptiness. I felt anticipation. Not for an affair, not for drama, not for chaos, but for the possibility of discovering who I was beneath the predictable routines, beneath the years of doing what was expected, the possibility of feeling again, no matter where it led. And for the first time in decades, I didn't feel invisible. Not to him. Not to myself. Not to the world. The following week passed like a slow tide, pulling at me in ways I couldn't fully articulate. Every morning, I woke to the familiar hum of the coffee machine, the soft creak of the front door as Mark left, and the muted chatter of the neighborhood outside my window. Everything appeared ordinary, predictable, safe. But beneath that surface, my heart was no longer predictable. It pulsed with a quiet insistence, a persistent awareness that I could no longer ignore. I found myself noticing Isaac in ways that made my chest tighten unexpectedly. A glance in the hallway at a neighborhood gathering, a message left on my phone that didn't demand a response, a fleeting moment in the parking lot of the grocery store. Small things, insignificant to anyone else, yet monumental to me. Each encounter left me simultaneously exhilarated and terrified. Mark, as always, remained oblivious in his preoccupied world. He smiled, nodded, asked about errands and schedules, and left the house with the same distracted energy he always carried. There was love there, yes, but it was practical, grounded, comfortable, safe. But I had tasted something else now, something that made me ache for its quiet intensity. One evening, after a particularly long day filled with errands and household tasks, I stepped onto the porch, letting the evening air brush against my cheeks. The sky was heavy with gray clouds, the faint scent of rain drifting through the neighborhood. And there he was, Isaac, standing by his car, coat damp, hair slightly tousled from the drizzle. He didn't rush. He didn't call out. He simply existed in the space of possibility, a presence that drew me in before any words were spoken. "Grace," he said softly, voice low, careful, carrying that weightless gravity he always seemed to command. "I didn't expect to see you," I admitted, though my voice betrayed a thrill I tried to hide. "I didn't expect to be anywhere else," he replied, a small smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "I just thought I'd check in. See how you're feeling." And in that simple gesture, I felt a storm of emotions I hadn't allowed myself to acknowledge. Relief, desire, curiosity, fear. It was overwhelming and yet grounding. He didn't need to say more. Just being there, quietly, respectfully, was enough to make my pulse quicken. We walked slowly through the neighborhood, the damp air carrying the faint scent of rain, soaked grass and earth. Every step was deliberate, every word chosen carefully, as if we both understood the unspoken rules we were navigating. Not crossing lines, yet skirting close enough to feel the electric tension between us. "I keep thinking about last week," I admitted softly, almost as if speaking the words aloud would make them real. "About you. About us." He glanced at me, eyes steady, calm, but filled with a warmth that made my chest ache. "And," he asked gently, "what do you feel?" I hesitated. The truth was complicated, layered, and frightening. "I don't know," I said honestly. "I feel seen. And that scares me. Because it's been so long since anyone really noticed me. Not for what I do, or how I manage my life, but for me, just me." He nodded slowly, taking a careful breath. "I see you, Grace," he said softly. "I see you for who you are. And nothing you've done, nothing you've been, changes that. You're important. And you matter." His words, quiet and sincere, struck me in a place I had long forgotten existed. Tears pricked the corners of my eyes, not from guilt, not from shame, but from the overwhelming realization that someone, not Mark, not the world, had taken the time to notice me fully, to acknowledge the years, the patience, the quiet sacrifices, and still see the woman beneath. We reached a small park, the swings swaying slightly in the breeze, the air thick with the smell of wet grass and soil. We sat on a bench, far enough apart to respect boundaries, close enough to feel the tension in the space between us. "Grace," he said after a long pause, voice low, steady, "I'm not here to complicate your life. Not to disrupt your marriage. Not to demand anything from you. But I can't pretend I don't feel this connection. And I want you to know it's real. It's honest. And it's patient. I'll wait. I'll respect your pace. I'll respect your choices. Always. His words, measured and deliberate, left me breathless. I realized that this wasn't about temptation. It wasn't about reckless passion or desire for something forbidden. It was about acknowledgement. Presence. A recognition that I existed, fully, and that someone valued that existence. I turned to him, voice trembling slightly. Isaac. I don't know what I want. I don't know what I can allow myself to want. But I don't regret feeling this. Feeling alive. He reached out, resting a hand on mine. Not forceful, not demanding, just a gentle touch that conveyed support, warmth, and respect. That's all I ask, he said quietly. That you allow yourself to feel, to be seen, to be you. And in that simple touch, I felt the weight of years lift slightly. Not the responsibilities, not the routines, not the commitments, but the quiet, invisible weight of being unnoticed, unvalued, and taken for granted. That weight began to ease. Slowly. Carefully. We stayed there until the sky darkened, until the streetlights flickered on and cast soft pools of light across the empty park. I felt a strange mixture of longing and serenity. Longing for more, for him, for connection. Serenity in the understanding that I had control, that I could choose, that I was not powerless. When he finally stood to leave, the tension didn't dissipate entirely. It lingered, subtle, potent, a reminder that our lives had changed in ways neither of us could fully define. We exchanged a look, quiet, understanding, and then he walked away without a word. No rush, no drama. Just presence, honesty, and a promise left unsaid but deeply understood. I watched him go, my heart steady yet alive, knowing that life had shifted, irrevocably, in the quietest, most unexpected way. The pull between us was no longer just a fleeting thought. It was a force, patient, persistent, waiting for me to acknowledge it fully. And I realized, standing alone on the porch in the cool night air, that for the first time in decades, I didn't just exist. I was awake. I was present. I was alive.